Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, America. You are now listening to Mikasa Sukasa, and I am your host, Nico House. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. Once again, we are going to bring that real talk, if you will. Now, in all seriousness, there has been a lot of crazy stuff going on in the news. And so this week, we're going to have a lot to report on between here, the YouTube channel, of course, which you can look up MCSC Network or type in my name, Nico House, and you should see that come up. You'll also not only be getting some reporting from myself, but you'll be getting some reporting on what's going on at the California Democratic Convention by two of our reporters, our field people, Fiorella and Craig. They will be posting updates on YouTube and on the Facebook page for MCSC. You can just just type in my name, Nico D House, and you'll be able to find that information there as well. We also have some great information coming in from international news from Insight News. So definitely go to the Facebook and YouTube page. Go to both of those and check out some of the news we have coming this way. I have gotten the updates from you. People who have messaged me told me that they haven't been seeing my podcast update to all the different platforms that I belong to. Now, if you have iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, or even Spoke in SoundCloud, if you have not been seeing all of my podcasts, I'm going to try and reconcile that today, because I was not aware that was happening until you all told me, essentially. Because a lot of the times we don't get stat updates. The podcast could upload and it will tell me that I uploaded 3 days later, and we don't. And the stats about who watches it, we don't get for 2 weeks to a month, depending on what platform you belong to. So thank you all so much for updating me and reaching out to me, and letting me know. I'm going to try to reconcile that in the future. With that being said, I do want to go ahead and get into it. I have been following this Broward County shooting very closely as of late. And the reason why is because, one, I live in Broward County. Parkland is right down the street from my house. It bothers me to think about the fact that this could have been totally prevented. As you all know, Nicholas De Cruz has had quite a background, including one that is shown an obvious display of mental instability, but I would say even more so, someone who could be potentially dangerous not only to himself but to other people around him. It has already been reported that he is a Trump supporter, and that really isn't what bothers me as much so the fact that there was a conversation reported saying that he wanted to see black people back in chains, Mexicans working and deported, and working for him or deported. The news, it just kept getting, worse and worse, the stuff that I would read about him. But even though the tragedy itself is one of the saddest that I've seen, the reaction has garnered mixed feelings out of me. As you all know, I'm not really an extremist person one way or the other, but I am a realist when it comes to politics and political agenda. And some people don't like how I feel about the situation, and that's perfectly fine. They're entitled to their opinions. But the reality is the reality. It doesn't, facts are facts and the truth is the truth. It doesn't really matter whether or not you like the truth. It doesn't matter whether or not it's convenient or comfortable for the narrative that you would like to see. But the truth is the truth nonetheless. So I was on Twitter, unfortunately, as usual. Y'all keep me busy on there, by the way. I'm supposed to be doing some work, and then I'll be reading something, and somebody will tag me in some craziness. And you're like, hey, Nico, somebody was talking some shit, bro. You got to take care of this. I'm like, oh, snaps. Let me head to Twitter real quick. That'll be distracting me, man. But luckily, this distracting was good. I was on Twitter, and I saw David Hoggs, I believe it was his account, that retweeted an episode of Ellen Degeneris that he and another one of his comrades appeared on. And weirdly enough, I know a lot of people were like empowered by that, I'm sure. Some people were Like, wow, I can't believe, like, 17-year-old kids, they organize and now they're on Ellen DeGeneres. That's amazing. That's amazing. And in a lot of ways, it should be commended. Absolutely. But let me get one thing straight, ladies and gentlemen. I may be slow sometimes, but I'm not naive, okay? I may be optimistic, but I am not naive. I am not naive enough to believe that anything will come from a movement based around a group of people or an incident that is comfortable enough to be put on Ellen DeGeneres. Do you get my point, people? I know it sounds a little rude. It sounds like I'm being harsh, but I'm not. It's a fact. This is historically a fact. If the movement is based around an issue comfortable enough to go on Ellen DeGeneres, and by that I mean mainstream media, then the truth of the matter is your movement is not going to yield any substantive outcome like legitimate gun reform or any of the other policies necessary in order for gun violence to be significantly reduced across the board. Well, how can you say that so confidently, Nico? Well, I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen. If you all recall, I've done a couple of podcasts and a few videos on the Women's March. Now, what was one of my largest critiques about the Women's March? Well, one of the largest critiques was that when I got done going to the first Women's March, I told you all it was a very uncomfortable experience for me just because it wasn't what it was advertised to be, right? It was advertised to be a march around women's issues, around legitimate policy stances, substantive change, palpable equity for women, things that I all believe in as somebody who has a single mother, and I respect, I respect the fight for the equality and equity of women, 100%. And if it's a legitimate move, then I will absolutely be there. However, this was not the case. I asked one woman what the march was about. She said, I thought it was a Hillary Clinton or, a Hillary Clinton rally. The other lady said she thought it was a anti-Trump rally. Clearly, those are not the things that I thought it was. And then, of course, I started looking around a little bit, and I realized, holy shit, I'm the slow one. Not naive, but I am the slow one. Like I said, I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I tried to be optimistic. But what was really curious to me was, this was probably two things that tipped it overboard. When the NYPD told me, casually in the genuine conversation, I'm getting paid to stand around here. And I said, whoa, hold up there, homeboy. How are you getting paid to stand around here? Who the hell is paying you? Because no offense, I'm not saying this is one of you or you specifically, but whenever there's a legitimate protest about an issue that is contrary to what the establishment promotes, y'all are the first ones out here with batons and SWAT gear and tanks. Once again, no offense to you. And he was a nice guy. He's cool. He's like, they got paid to do this. It's actually considered extra duty for them, and they were getting paid. And it started making sense to me. I said, how the hell was all this paid for? And I'm going to go into that in a second. Now, I went to a restaurant afterwards, and I realized really quickly when we turned on the television, CNN was talking about the Women's March and how large it was and how it was a statement to Donald Trump. MSNBC doing the same thing. BBC doing the same thing. All the major mainstream media. If you look at the Washington Post, it was doing the same thing. The Daily Kos, it was doing the same thing. And I realized this was co-opted, a legitimate issue was co-opted by the establishment. A legitimate issue. Something that needs change desperately. And because of the desperation of the group affected, but also the size of the group affected, they were willing to let anyone co-opt their movement. i.e. any woman that participated like actively thinking that that was an actual women's march. So fast forward. Fast forward to 2018 after this Parkland shooting, which was legitimate. I'm telling you, people lost lives here. So don't think that it was fake by any means. Don't think it was fake, please. It did happen. Now, what happened afterwards is a little curious to me. Because what happened afterwards were, 4, 5 kids maybe, have, after about a week or so after the shooting, approaching 1 million followers between the 3 of them, or 4 of them. One of them has like 250,000. That's Emma Gonzales. David Hoggs. When I first checked his account, he wasn't verified at about 25, 30,000. Then he's up to 120,000. It's verified by the end of the day. I have the pictures. I have the pictures of all the profiles actually before they were verified, believe it or not. And they were jumping by tens of thousands throughout the day. And it's like their bravery. I say bravery because it is necessary for young people to get activated. Don't get me wrong, people. Don't get me wrong. I do appreciate that. But I also have a bit of hesitation in my voice because I believe their bravery may be being pushed. As in, I know for a fact that their bravery is absolutely being pushed. All right? Now, if I was the type of person to just believe every narrative that I saw, then maybe y'all probably wouldn't listen to me because there are a lot of people who just push narratives and they do pretty damn well off of it. But you didn't come here for me to push narratives for you, I'm assuming. Because that's not what I've ever done. So I hope that's not what you're here for. You are on the wrong channel, man. You're on the wrong podcast. I'm sorry. But I hate to break it to you. But it's because there's good reason for it. Now, like I said, Twitter has been promoting all their speeches, right? On top of that, they managed to organize a march, the March for Our Lives, raised 2.5 million, I believe is what they're at right now. They raised that initial 1.5 million, by the way, in about 3 days via GoFundMe. GoFundMe racked out off of that one because they're going to take about 10% of that. So, which is what, 100,000? Well, no, if it's I guess 200,000 if it's when they hit that 2 million. Good God. But anyway, that's why I don't go through GoFundMe if I can help it. But they raised $2 million for this thing. They filed a 501c3, 501c4 nonprofit. They also booked many buses to travel across the nation to get people to these marches. All right. So they also got permits. They also got permits for not only Washington D.C. but Tallahassee, Florida, which is the capital of Florida. People, they did all this in like a week, less than a week. I'm telling you this now. It's Sunday. So it's Sunday the 25th. It's Sunday the 25th right now. However, this all started, they initially got everything filed in the verification marks on Tuesday or Wednesday. People, these 17-year-old kids have the clout of a 30-year senator. I'm not joking, people. You end up on Ellen DeGeneris. Cameron Kasky ends up writing an article for CNN, which CNN would never allow unless they knew they were going to control the outcome of the narrative being written. David Hoggs works for the Sun Sentinel, which is a neoliberal publication known to constantly attack Tim Canova and other progressive candidates in Florida, constantly defend Debbie Weiserman Schultz. Yes, it is a fact, however, that David Hoggs' dad did work for the FBI. That is a fact. It is a fact that the sheriffs did not go into the school to stop them from being shot down. That is a fact. It is also a fact that there is a woman who reported to local news here, which is the only way I saw it, and it ended up going viral. I didn't know it would go viral. I'm thankful that it did, though. But what she said was that she was walking with Nicholas De Cruz as 2 more shots went off. We don't know where he dropped the gun. We don't even know. He's not pleading guilty. That situation in itself is weird, but the outcome of it is becoming more and more. I get nervous whenever I see a bunch of kids who only attack the Democratic Party. The only face we see constantly is Marco Rubio, people. It's Marco Rubio. I get worried when I see permits being awarded in days to kids. I get nervous when I see every single profile that these kids upload. Everyone who has at all been public, like been on television at all, or even commented significantly on this, like who is from Parkland, by the way, or Douglas High. Every one of those kids have been verified. Every one of those organizations, their March for Our Lives organization, the Never Again organization, all of them have been verified. I'm not joking. Twitter hasn't verified an account since October, or really November of 2017, because they accidentally verified way too many white supremacists along the way. Not exaggerating. That's exactly what they do. Matter of fact, if you go to the Twitter website, if you go to, I think it's verification.twitter.com, you will see that they say, oops, you can't perform this action right now because you're not allowed to even apply for verification anymore. But these kids are being bolstered and pushed to the forefront. And I want you to know something, people. Notice how out of all the conversation that's being had, out of all the talks, all the demands, you know, there was how many demands there were? There were about as many demands as there were at the Women's March. Now you're starting to see the pattern? You want to know the demands? The demands consisted of, let's ban assault weapons, assault rifles, if you will. Mind you, people, by the way, because the Democratic Party, which does take money from the NRA, but that's really the money from the NRA isn't like they can. Just because you don't get an NRA discount at your local car rental place does not mean that the NRA is defeated, nor that the Republican Party is going to be defeated by the NRA. Let's be clear about that. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lobbyists every day, including the gun manufacturer lobbyists, by the way. That wasn't supposed to rhyme. It just happened to rhyme. But including the gun manufacturer lobbyists who literally pay to make sure that this type of thing happens. As in, we have substantive conversation, but there are no demands being requested. If you say ban on assault rifles, guess what the gun manufacturers and Democrats are going to do? They're going to laugh at you. Because there's not necessarily a ban on Uzis. Now, you won't be able to just pick that up and walk out to the store. Like, it's not in the same category. I'm going to put it like that. There are a lot of things that don't happen that shouldn't happen in regards to gun control, but aren't allowed to happen because you're right. They are correct while saying that the NRA does give Republicans an active incentive to not pass gun reform. But what they are not incorrect in is assuming that gun lobbyists only aim at the Republicans. Not true. In fact, they aim at Democrats in the committees. Yeah, only one Democrat took NRA-specific money during his run, but donations are not only given during an election race, people. For example, the Appropriations Committee and the National Defense Committee both had the NRA give them money. close to 12,000 apiece, where the reigning, and by the way, I mean to the Democrats. There were more given to the Republicans because there were more Republicans on either committee respectively, but they took 12,000 to the Democrats. Now, people say that's not a big deal, except for it is, because those Democrats could stop a piece of legislation from getting through committee. Now, if I grease the wheels a little bit, the piece of legislation never gets through committee because the Democrats shoot it down as soon as they get it. In fact, I would even say that $12,000 damn near goes a lot farther than that, $48,000 total I think they gave to the Republicans. Why? Republicans are going to stop gun reform laws from going through because that's what their fucking constituency wants, period. Even if they did not take the money from the NRA, they would still vote in favor, or vote against, I should say, gun reform. Because their constituents don't want gun reform. In fact, they want more gun rights. So then we have to circle back to, well, does it really matter how much the NRA donates to Republican candidates who are literally some of the most pro-Second Amendment gun nuts? No, it doesn't matter. And the Democrats know this. Everybody who is actively involved in politics, who is looking at this from an objective perspective, knows it doesn't matter if the NRA divests from the Republican Party, period. Why? Because in Texas, in order for you to get elected, you need to be pro-Second Amendment, quote unquote. You know what I mean by pro-Second Amendment. Don't get all, oh, what does that even mean? It doesn't mean that you're against the Second Amendment if you want gun reform. I know, I'm aware. Doesn't matter, you know what I'm saying. But seriously, Alabama, you think you're going to win an election by saying that you're pro-gun reform? Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, Oklahoma. Hell, Bernie Sanders has a D- rating with the NRA, and even he couldn't win an election if he went out and talked about extreme gun reform in Vermont as a huge part of his platform. He made sure that hunting rifles were still protected, which is fine. I don't think anybody's worried about a hunting rifle in school. Do you get my point, though? There's no substantive change coming from any movement that appears on Ellen DeGeneres, people. There is no substantive change. Say this with me. There is no substantive change from any movement, there's no substantive change that will come from any movement that appears on Ellen DeGeneres. Ellen DeGeneres has a tongue twister name when you think about it. She really does. Ellen DeGeneres. But seriously, want to know how I know? Ask if the indigenous people of Standing Rock were invited on Ellen DeGeneres. Ask if the indigenous people of Standing Rock were escorted by the Bismarck, North Dakota Police Department. I'm pretty sure it's quite the contrary. Ask if the indigenous woman who lost her eye because of quote-unquote volunteer police officers at Standing Rock while protecting our water source. That's right, our water source, because once that pipe leaked into that water source, it not only affected the water source of the area, it not only affected the land of the Lakotas, but it also affected the water supply seeping into the rest of the country, as will the rest of the oil pipelines. They are notably fallible. Like, they will break. They will break, they will bust, they will dent, they will crack, oil will be leaked. And this would affect the entire nation. But because those bullets that were used in Parkland and other school shootings were used, and they take life fast, I guess we don't care about the snake that takes life slowly. And that's exactly what it is doing. Water is life, people. Meaning Wakona. But they don't appear on Ellen DeGeneres if you come from NYU, leave college to go protect the water that gives us this life on the land that was promised by our United States government to an indigenous people. And you go over there and you lose your arm because of volunteer police officers. But did you think she got on Ellen DeGeneres? Do you think she got 2.5 million raised? You know what she did? Funny enough, she went to prevent us from having to argue about this and fight about this and fight Congress and fight the Senate and fight the president 20 years from now when half of the country has cancer because of the oil that is leaked into these pipelines. Or excuse me, that is leaked into our water supply. She was being preventative. But you don't remember sometimes, but the establishment doesn't like preventative. The Black Liberation Movement was not celebrated by the establishment. It was not celebrated by Lyndon B. Johnson, yet he had to succumb to it because of the likes of MLK, Malcolm X, Huey P. Newton, Angela Johnson. I mean, they succumbed to it because of the reaction. Their steps were reactionary, but even still, we still saw a lot of the same. It didn't die. We saw some of the same vitriol that existed, and we still see some of the same vitriol that existed before the Civil Rights Amendments were passed. We still see it today. Because it wasn't done. Lyndon B. Johnson didn't pass the Civil Rights Amendments because he was listening to what Martin Luther King and what the people wanted. It was done as a reactionary measure to try and secure office for the Democrats, even though he was racist as hell. And it worked, actually. You know, even Ronald Reagan tried to pretend. He tried to take credit for the Berlin Wall coming down. He tried to take credit saying, you know, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. It was such a popular speech and people cheered and it was so patriotic, and that's actually what Ronald Reagan was known for. I'm still kind of confused as to what Ronald Reagan did that was significantly beneficial to any working class American, because whenever people talk about Ronald Reagan, it's usually in reference to how he was the one responsible for the destruction of communism, which was not the case, nor is he responsible for the uplifting or the lifting up of the middle class. He was the total opposite of that also. But Ronald Reagan, in a reactionary way, responded to Gorbachev already agreeing to tear down that wall, and he had no idea what the sentiment would be. You think that he would say, Gorbachev, tear down that wall, if he thought that it wasn't coming down? In fact, he probably planned it pretty spot on, because as soon as he said bring down the wall came down, and so of course Ronald Reagan was credited with the Berlin Wall coming down. But what people don't know is that the intelligentsia of Eastern Europe, the working class of Eastern Europe, and many non-corrupted officials of Eastern Europe all band together to reunite Western Europe and Eastern Europe, Western Germany and Eastern Germany. They were the ones who fought for their independence from Soviet Russia. And then, of course, as we usually do in American politics, we react and think we did something substantive. I would say the one time that we were, quote unquote, preventative, or the two times, are our war in all the Middle Eastern countries, because we're trying to prevent any of them from gaining any type of stability that can make them a threat militarily, resource-wise, or otherwise. So we attack them before they've even done anything. Just ask Assad. Let's ask, you can't ask him. I was about to say ask Gaddafi. You can't ask him because we killed him in 2012. After trying to kill him for about 30 years with no legitimate justification. We have been proactive. We were proactive when we used those nuclear weapons because we didn't want to go back to war, because we didn't know if we could secure our power, our image as being the number one superpower. We didn't know if we could secure that if the world did not have a looming threat, because we didn't know if we can go into another war and win people. We didn't win And we didn't win World War II. Russia did, pretty much. If you've been paying attention, they lost a lot of soldiers. They won a lot of battles, though. They fizzled out. The Axis powers fizzled out. When did we decide to join the war, people, if y'all remember? Oh, yeah, after Pearl Harbor happened. That was our excuse, because we were profiting. When did we decide to recognize the Holocaust? During the Olympics of that year, whenever we stopped a bunch of Jews from getting in? Or whenever Hitler, stopped a bunch of Jews from getting in. That's the only way, by the way, that, oh, man, I can't even remember his name now. I am ashamed to be black. Whew. Jesse Jackson? No, not Jesse Jackson. Man. Something Owens? Jesse Owens. Yeah. Ha-ha. There you go. I believe it was Jesse Owens. I hope it was Jesse Owens. Black community, don't be mad at me when y'all hear this if I don't remember. But seriously, that was the only way that Jesse Owens was allowed to run, because Hitler stopped Jewish people from running. And we tried to still pretend as if the Holocaust was not a real thing. We allowed the Olympics to be in Germany and tried to pretend that the Holocaust was not a real thing. While we profited from war, and then we decided to get into war after we were attacked. And yeah, we helped win it, but we weren't the reason we won. Those nuclear weapons helped stop future wars, but it did not win the World War II, the Second World War. Oh man, people, the pattern is so well established. We don't, anything that is not for the establishment wealthy interests of this country, you don't, if it's not for them, you're not getting substantive change. You're not appearing on Ellen. You're not appearing on MSNBC. You're not appearing on CNN. You're not being interviewed after interview after interview after interview from big establishment media conglomerates. The only time that happens, people, is when you are not, when you're like a puppet at that point. And I don't want to be rude. And I don't want to be, cynical. But I'm not being cynical. I'm happy to see this many kids activated. But it's the 3 to 4 kids that are being used and recycled for a clear agenda. Perhaps the agenda of trying to flip Florida blue, maybe. Because of how many electoral delegates there are. Oh, yeah. Florida's important. Why do you think they keep attacking Marco Rubio? You think Marco Rubio has any pull in the Senate? No. He doesn't even go to work in the Senate, people. He doesn't even go to work. Literally, he's rarely there for votes. He's rarely there for voting. Marco Rubio doesn't have any clout. Why are you talking to him? You want to attack him, but you want to attack the Democrats who take money from gun manufacturers? Hell, one of the committees that I mentioned that was taking money from the RA, where the Democrats were taking money from the RA, it's Senator Nita, senior Democrat from New York, on the Appropriations Committee, I believe. If it wasn't the Appropriations Committee, it was the National Defense Committee. But either way, she was a Democrat who took money from the NRA, and people who think that is insignificant, you better think again, because fuck your legislation, fuck the, you all see the final result, but you don't know what it takes to get to that final result. And if I can stop that legislation from getting through the committees, it doesn't matter. We don't even have a discussion. So it damn sure is important. I think that's going to be it for this evening, or for this episode. Not for this evening. I probably have more stuff to do tonight. I probably shouldn't try to predict that I won't have anything to do. But thank you all so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. I think I should say, though, if you are not following my YouTube page, you better do it. You better do it, people, because I have a big interview coming up. And I can't say who it is. I can't say yet. But you don't want to miss it. I'm going to do it live. I'm going to do it live, and we're going to get it popping. All right? I am hoping that we hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube by the end of March, and I am hoping that we hit 1,000. I'm hoping that we hit 2,000 downloads on Podbean, and I'm hoping for about 6,000 total by the end of March as well. And the way that you can help us achieve that is by sharing our podcast, sharing the podcast, sharing the YouTube page. Sometimes that can be even more important than dollars, because you can spend as much money on a product, have the best production, have the best quality, which we aim for, of course. And a lot of you have helped us significantly with that. But the reality of the situation is, if nobody sees it, then it doesn't matter how good your product is, right? So please share the podcast, share the videos, donate to Patreon, join our One Follow $1 campaign. But most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, always remember, find your balance. Peace.